The late afternoon sun cast long amber streaks across the bakery window. As Emma Vasquez wiped flour from her arms, the scent of cinnamon and burnt caramel lingering in the air, her back ached. She'd been on her feet for 10 hours already, elbows deep in dough, piping cream into eclairs, and trying not to think about her dwindling bank account. She'd barely set down her icing spatula when her phone rang, buzzing with a kind of urgency that made her stomach tighten. Leela's name lit up the screen. Emma. Came the voice on the other end, strained and rasping. "Oh, thank God. I need the biggest favor of my life." Emma pulled off her apron, frowning. "Leela, you sound like death." "I feel like death. Food poisoning. I've been hugging my toilet for the last 2 hours." She groaned. "But listen, please tell me your freaking night." Emma sat on a stool behind the counter and checked the time. She was technically free for the next 5 hours before her evening prep shift at the cafe. Define free. I was supposed to cater a private dinner tonight. It's through Echelon. Super elite client. If I cancel, I'm toast. Like contract shredded toast. But everything is prep, menu is set. Ingredients are being delivered. You just have to go there and cook it. Emma's brows furrowed. "Leela, I'm not Echelon material. I bake pastries and make mac and cheese for baristas. But you're good, Em, so good. Remember that birthday dinner you threw last year? You made seared scallops with vanilla bean butter. For God's sake, that was for 7 people. At my apartment. In pajamas. This is for one client," Leela wheezed. 7 courses. But he eats alone. Total recluse. You just cook and serve. Please, Emma. If I lose this client, I lose all my Echelon gigs. There was a pause. Emma thought about her rent due in 6 days. About the leak in her bathroom ceiling. About the notebook in her kitchen drawer filled with menu ideas for a cafe she might never afford. She sighed. "Kay," she muttered. "But you owe me. Like, a bakery wing named after me kind of owe me." "Oh my God, you're saving my life." Leela coughed violently. "Okay? The address is 1461 Cloudcrest Lane, in the hills. The ingredients will be delivered there. I'll text you the menu and notes, Emma. Just be professional and don't freak out. He's very particular. Double quotes. Emma didn't like the sound of that dot. By 5:15 p.m. She had changed into her best black blouse and high-waisted slacks, tied her dark curls into a bun, and thrown on just enough makeup to look competent, not trying. The drive into the hills was surreal, city noise fading behind her, replaced by sleek, silent roads that curled like satin ribbons around modern mansions of steel and glass. When she reached the gate at 1461 Cloudcrest, it opened before she could even buzz. The estate was almost otherworldly. Floor-to-ceiling windows gleamed like crystal. Sculptures rose from the manicured lawn like frozen dancers. Everything felt curated and cold, like stepping inside a museum that whispered, "You don't belong here." Emma parked beside a matte black luxury car that probably cost more than her parents' house. She clutched her phone like a lifeline as the front door opened to reveal a tall, silver-haired butler. "Miss Vasquez?" he asked. She nodded. "This way." No small talk, no warmth, just the sound of their footsteps echoing through polished stone floors and underlit hallways. They passed a sculpture that looked like a human heart cast in obsidian. She nearly asked who lived here, but something told her not to. The butler stopped outside a set of double doors and gestured. "The dining suite." Emma took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside was a private dining room, unlike anything she'd seen. Golden light washed over a long table set for 2, the walls lined with soft abstract paintings. But none of it registered because standing at the far end of the room, hands in his pockets, was Adrian Holt. Her heart plummeted. He looked older than the magazine covers, more human. Tousled dark hair, clean-shaven, slate gray sweater over dress pants. But there was no mistaking the piercing eyes, the same eyes she'd seen in news articles, boardroom broadcasts. The man whose tech company had promised to revolutionize public education and ended up gutting her father's pension fund in the process. She froze. He turned toward her, calm and unreadable. "You're not Leela," he said. Emma's voice caught in her throat. "No," she finally managed. "I'm just doing her a favor." Adrian Holt nodded slowly, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Well," he said quietly, "let's see what favors taste like." The kitchen looked like it belonged in a Michelin-starred restaurant, not a private home. Emma had seen commercial kitchens with less elegance. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under soft recessed lighting. The marble countertops were the color of storm clouds, and above the stove, A copper pot rack hung like jewelry in a showroom. Adrian Holt leaned against the far counter, arms crossed, watching her with the kind of gaze that could either cut or cradle. She couldn't tell which. It unnerved her. "You've been very quiet," he said after a long silence. His voice was low and unhurried, the kind that didn't need to raise volume to command attention. Emma shrugged, trying to keep her movements calm as she began unpacking the ingredient boxes that had arrived. Before her, "I wasn't expecting you." A faint smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "Most people don't." She said nothing, letting the rustle of parchment and the clinking of glass containers fill the room. She could feel his presence behind her as clearly as heat from an open flame. To close, to quiet, to still. A man like that shouldn't be this quiet. It felt unnatural, like the calm before an explosion. "Did Leela tell you who I was?" "No," Emma said flatly, "just that you were important." He chuckled, dryly. "That's debatable." She spun toward him before she could stop herself. "You know what's not debatable? That you ruined my father's life." Adrian's expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes flickered, not surprised recognition. "I thought your name sounded familiar," he said, straightening. "Vasquez, Principal Michael Vasquez. He ran that district initiative." She nodded once. "Until your software tanked the program, and the board blamed him for the mess." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, slow and deliberate. He wasn't supposed to be the scapegoat. That wasn't the plan. "No," Emma said, her voice sharp, "but that's how it went. Headlines, hearings, no pension. Do you know what? It's like watching someone who dedicated their life to helping kids pack up his office in silence because a Billionaire's pilot program collapsed. Do you even care?" A pause. The air thickened like honey in her throat. "I did care," Adrian said quietly, "but by the time I found out how far the damage spread, the lawyers had already buried it. I was too late." "That sounds like a very expensive apology," Emma said, turning back to the cutting board. Her hands shook as she peeled the pears for the salad. She hated that she was here. Hated more that her stomach twisted not just with anger, but curiosity. The man standing across from her wasn't the monster she'd imagined. He looked tired, haunted. "Even, I didn't bring you here to apologize," Adrian said, almost to himself. "I brought you here because I didn't want to eat alone." Again, Emma froze. "I've had chefs," he continued, "private ones, corporate ones. They come, they serve, they leave. It's efficient. But I haven't sat across from a stranger and had a real conversation in over 7 months. And you think hiring one is the answer?" He smiled faintly, not denying it. She placed the pear slices carefully on the chilled salad plates and garnished them with edible flowers. Leela's instructions had been precise. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to serve." "You're here," he said slowly, "because Leela trusted you. And because you're good. I've read your blog." Emma blinked. "My blog? Flour and Fire. A little culinary journal, buried in the forgotten corners of the internet. But your piece on grief and cinnamon toast about your dad, that stuck with me." Her throat tightened. That entry was 3 years old. She'd written it during the worst winter of her life, not expecting anyone would read it, certainly not the man at the center of it. "You had no right. I didn't know it was you," he interrupted. "Not at first. I just knew the writing felt honest." She gritted her teeth. "You're not supposed to buy your way into absolution with praise, either." "I'm not," he said. "I'm just trying to have one evening that feels real." Emma didn't respond. She worked in silence, plating the course with practiced hands, furious at the tears burning behind her eyes. She hated that he remembered her words, hated that his voice wasn't cruel, hated that a part of her wanted to believe he meant what he said. By the time the appetizer was plated, the sun had slipped behind the hills. The dining room beyond the glass kitchen wall had transformed, lit now by soft amber sconces and tall candles that flickered along the length of the table. Adrian waited by the door, still watching her with that unreadable expression. "Will you eat with me?" he asked. She paused, apron in hand. "That wasn't the deal." "No," he said. "It wasn't. But maybe the deal needs rewriting." Emma hesitated. She could walk. She could serve the food, collect the check, and vanish from his life like a ghost. She owed him nothing, but something kept her rooted. Not forgiveness. Not attraction. Something more dangerous. Curiosity. She untied her apron and hung it over the stool. "I'll stay for one course," she said. "But if you say anything that sounds remotely like PR spin, I'm leaving." He nodded. "Fair." She carried the plates to the dining room. The long table gleamed. 2 empty seats sat across from one another. Emma set the plates down and took the seat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. The pear salad glistened under the candlelight like glass art. She picked up her fork. "Start talking," she said, and so he did. The fork trembled slightly in Emma's hand as she brought the first bite to her mouth. The flavors were bright ripe pear, the faint tang of chaver, the delicate snap of candied walnuts, but she barely tasted them. Across the candlelit table, Adrian Holt was watching her again, not like a man watches a woman, not like a predator watches prey, like a scientist observing a rare phenomenon he didn't quite understand. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "you want real conversation? Fine. Let's start here. Why the secrecy?" He tilted his head. "Secrecy? You hired a personal chef under a different name. You didn't tell Leela it was a solo dinner. And now you're telling me this whole elaborate setup is because what? You're lonely." He leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Is that so hard to believe?" Emma set her fork down. "You're Adrian Holt, multi-billionaire tech visionary. You don't do lonely, you do mergers and legacy, building and controlled PR scandals." A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "You forgot generational wealth and emotionally distant boardroom speeches." "I didn't forget," she said. "I just assumed those came with the software package." For a moment, his mask slipped. Something old and raw flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or guilt. He pushed aside his untouched salad and folded his hands on the table. "The truth is, I've spent so much of my life managing perception that I don't know what authenticity feels like anymore. This house is filled with curated everything. The books are picked by consultants. The art is leased. Even the coffee I drink was chosen by a branding firm. I'm exhausted." Emma stared at him, unsure whether to believe a word of it. "Then why keep doing it?" she asked. "If it's all so hollow, because I built this cage," he said quietly. "And when you build a cage beautiful enough, people forget it's still a prison." Something cold and strange twisted in her chest. It wasn't sympathy. She wasn't ready to go there, but for the first time, she saw the man beneath the empire, not the corporate avatar on magazine covers. A man sitting in a designer chair at a table set for 2, in a house that echoed when he walked alone. "Let me guess," she said, forcing steel back into her spine. "Hiring a stranger to share a meal is your idea of a jailbreak." Adrian didn't flinch. "No, hiring you was." She blinked. "I didn't expect it to be you," he added. "But when Leela said she had to send a substitute, and I realized it was Emma Vasquez, I couldn't cancel." Emma's blood turned to ice. "Wait, what?" He reached into his inner blazer pocket and pulled out a crumpled page. Her blog, the cinnamon toast entry, her name at the bottom. She hadn't published anything in over 2 years, and yet here it was in his pocket, like a relic. "I kept it," he said, "because of the way you wrote about grief, about love, about your father. It was one of the most honest things I've ever read, and I guess I wanted to meet the person who wrote it." A storm was rising in her chest now. Confusion, suspicion, fear. "You orchestrated this?" "No," he said quickly. "I didn't know it was you until today. But once I realized, I didn't want to stop it." Emma rose slowly from her chair. "You hunted me down. You knew who I was. You sat there and let me serve you knowing everything. I didn't know until you walked through that door. You're lying," she snapped, her voice cracking. "And I don't care how lonely or tragic you say you are. You don't get to hide behind that anymore. You don't get to pretend this is innocent." He stood, too, but not angrily. His tone was steady. "Control. I didn't plan this to manipulate you. I swear to you. But when I read your words, it was the first time I remembered what it felt like to feel something. You ruined lives," she whispered. "You built your fortune on promises you didn't keep. My dad believed in your education software, and when it failed, he took the fall. You just changed CEOs and filed it under losses. I never sign off on the rollout," Adrian said, his voice low now. "That platform went live against my direct orders. I was in Germany when it launched. The board rushed it for a stock boost before the quarterly report." Emma hesitated. The words didn't make sense, and yet there was something in his voice that made her want to listen. "Just for a second longer. I found out 6 days later," he continued, "and when I tried to pull the program, it was too late. The damage had already begun. You said nothing. My father built hold on silence," he said bitterly, "on shielding the brand. The first thing I ever learned about power was how much not to say. Emma stared at him, breathless. I didn't say anything then, Adrian said, but I'm saying something now. Silence stretched between them. Then, softly, he asked, "Can I show you something?" Emma hesitated. "No more speeches," he said, "just something real." Reluctantly, she nodded. He led her through the hallway and into a private study she hadn't noticed before. Dark wood, minimal design, a grand window overlooking the blackened hills. On a wall near the desk was a corkboard filled with newspaper clippings, handwritten notes. Penthouse. Emma stepped closer. Her father's photo. Old headlines. Principal resigns amid tech scandal. Her blog. Highlighted lines. Circles. Notes in the margins. "What is this?" she asked, breath catching. "My guilt," Adrian said. "Pinned where I can't ignore it. Every morning. Every night." Emma turned to him, her voice barely audible. "Why are you showing me this?" He stepped closer. "Because I'm not here to defend my past. I'm here to own it." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time that night, she didn't see a billionaire. She saw a man building a graveyard in his own home for every name he couldn't save. Her father's among them. Emma's chest tightened, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't know whether to hate Adrian Holt or mourn with him. The wall stared back at her. A collage of grief, guilt, and silent confessions. Emma stood frozen, eyes scanning the board that Adrian had built like a shrine. No, like a reckoning. Her father's photo, clipped from an old newspaper article, was in the center. Around it, layers of headlines, some faded, some printed from obscure education blogs she hadn't even realized still existed. There were hand-scrawled timelines, flowcharts, notes pinned like evidence in a crime investigation, because, to Adrian Holt, it was a crime, and he'd been living with the body ever since. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. "Why hold on to it all?" "Because someone has to," he said behind her, voice low and almost ashamed. "Because no one else in my world cared enough to remember." She turned to face him. "But you still didn't say anything publicly." "No one wanted to hear it. The moment I tried, the board reminded me that restitution looks like guilt. Guilt looks like liability, and liability gets you sued." Emma stared at him, every bone in her body aching with confusion. "So you built a wall of guilt in a room no one sees and let the world believe you didn't care?" "I cared too much," he said. "That was the problem." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Adrian stepped closer. "That program, the one your father believed in, it was supposed to work. I hired the best minds I could find. I fought with my father's board for a year to fund it. I believed in it, Emma. I thought it would change lives. You don't get to act like you were the victim," she snapped. "I'm not," he said. "But neither was your father the only casualty." She narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Adrian hesitated. She took a step toward him. "What aren't you telling me?" He looked past her, as if watching a memory. "There's something you should see," he said, walking to a locked drawer in his desk. He opened it and pulled out a sealed manila envelope, thick with documents. He handed it to her. "WORDLESSLY. Inside were emails, internal memos, whistleblower complaints, all time-stamped before the launch of the education software rollout." And one name appeared again and again: Michael Vasquez. Her father. Emma's hands trembled as she read. It wasn't accusations. It was silence, delays. Her father had been warned by internal district auditors about data instability, concerns flagged by teachers about the new software's failures in pilot classrooms. A 6-page report marked urgent was forwarded to him 3 days before the rollout and acknowledged with a brief, one-line response: "Proceed as planned. We've promised parents results." "No," Emma whispered, her throat dry. This isn't right. This can't be right. I didn't want you to find out this way," Adrian said quietly. "But the truth is, your father didn't fail because of me. He chose to believe in the rollout despite the red flags. He was trying to protect his job, his school, his pride." Emma's heart cracked like glass. "He made a mistake," Adrian said gently, "a human one, but the board needed a fall guy. Your father was in the crosshairs." She turned away from him, tears burning her vision. "You expect me to believe you over him?" "I expect you to believe the documents," he said. "He wasn't a villain, but he wasn't a martyr either." The room swam. Her childhood memories, the nights her father came home with dark circles under his eyes and called it progress. The moments he defended the whole program with unwavering faith. The way he fell apart when the media turned on him. Emma dropped into the leather chair beside the desk. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because I owed you the whole truth. Not the clean version, not the convenient one, the real one." The silence in the room was deafening. Then Adrian added, almost reluctantly, "There's more." Emma looked up. "After your father resigned, he filed a private appeal against the district," Adrian said, "not for his job but for the teachers affected by the failed program. He requested that part of his pension go to a discretionary teacher fund. The district buried the request, and the board denied it." Emma blinked rapidly. "I never knew that." "Because he didn't tell you. Because he was ashamed." Her chest tightened like a vice. "Why are you telling me this now?" Adrian's voice softened. "Because I'm trying to do what he couldn't." She stared at him, struggling to breathe. "I'm restoring the fund," Adrian said, "under a private foundation, no publicity, no name attached. It launches next month, and you, if you want, can sit on the advisory board." Emma stared at him as if seeing a stranger. The man she'd walked in ready to hate was unraveling everything she thought she knew. Not just about him, but about her father, about herself. Her voice came out barely a whisper. "You could have let me hate you. I still might," he said with a faint smile. "But I didn't want to leave this story unfinished, especially not when it still has another chapter." She shook her head slowly, stunned. "What chapter?" He stepped toward her. "The one where we figure out whether this night was fate or just unfinished business." Emma looked at the manila envelope in her hands, then at the board on the wall, then at him, a man who had everything and yet had spent years in silence, building a room full of ghosts. Something broke open inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of something she couldn't define. Maybe it was truth, maybe it was war, maybe it was both. But either way, she wasn't walking out of that house the same woman who walked in. It was after midnight when Emma stepped out onto the balcony, the envelope still clutched in her hands like a confession. Below, the city glittered like a wound stitched with light. She leaned on the cold glass railing, unsure of who she was anymore. Behind her, Adrian stood silent in the doorway, watching her, not approaching, just waiting. "I don't know what to do with any of this," she said, her voice hollow. "I came here to help a friend. I didn't expect this." "I didn't expect you either," he said. She turned to face him, the city at her back and the man who shattered her worldview in front of her. "That's the problem. Everything about you is unexpected, and I can't tell if that's a gift or a trap." Adrian opened his mouth to speak, but something stopped him. A flicker of movement near the hallway caught his eye. A soft buzz followed, a phone vibrating on the marble counter. He frowned and walked back inside. Emma followed slowly. He glanced at the screen. The color drained from his face. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the phone and walked briskly to his study. Emma trailed him, tension rising in her gut like smoke before a fire. He tapped a code into a hidden panel beside the bookshelf. A shelf slid aside with a mechanical hiss, revealing a recessed wall safe. He opened it and retrieved a smaller, locked tablet from inside. Emma watched from the doorway, her heart pounding. "Adrian," she said, "what the hell is going on?" He placed the tablet on his desk and unlocked it with his fingerprint and a retina scan. The screen flickered to life, displaying encrypted documents and video feeds. One of them was surveillance footage from the front gate. A black SUV had been parked there for hours. "I should have known he'd come back," Adrian muttered, scrolling rapidly. "Who?" Emma demanded. Adrian looked up, his face hardening in a way she hadn't seen all night. The guilt, the vulnerability had vanished, replaced by something colder, sharper. "My brother." Emma's stomach dropped. "You have a brother." "Had," Adrian said. "Half-brother. Different mothers. Same father. He left years ago. Took his inheritance, burned his bridges, and nearly destroyed the company before I rebuilt it." "What does he want now?" Adrian exhaled, slowly. "He wants leverage." Emma folded her arms. "Why now?" "Because he knows I'm vulnerable. Because he probably found out I've been liquidating shares, setting up new trusts. He's not just after money. He's after legacy. And if he saw you come here..." He didn't finish. Emma took a step back. "I'm not a liability. I know that," Adrian said. "But he doesn't care. He'll twist anything he can." "And what exactly does he have on you?" Adrian hesitated long. Emma stared. "What does he know?" "Adrian," he looked at her, Every word a razor. That the software failure that ruined your father wasn't just incompetence. It may have been sabotage. The room dropped into silence. Emma's blood went cold. You mean someone wanted it to fail? Adrian nodded grimly. My brother was behind the push to launch early. He was working with outside investors. If the public sector programs collapsed, they had plans to privatize the educational contracts and sell them off. Emma could barely process it. And you never told anyone. I couldn't prove it. I tried. Every time I got close, witnesses vanished. Records were wiped. He was too careful, and if I had gone public without proof, the board would have crucified me. And now, Adrian looked out the window. Now, you're here, and that changes everything. She shook her head. I'm not part of this war between you two. You were never supposed to be. He said, but he'll see you as a weakness. He'll try to use you to get to me. Emma crossed her arms tightly. You should have warned me. I didn't think. He stopped, corrected himself. I hoped he wouldn't resurface. The doorbell rang. Both of them flinched. Adrian pulled out his phone. The gate camera showed the black SUV parked just outside the estate entrance. A man stood in front of it, wearing a tailored coat and a cruel smirk. Emma didn't need to ask. She could tell. This was the shadow that had been following Adrian's life from the edges. Adrian turned to her. Go out the back, now. But Emma didn't move. No, you're not shutting me out now. This isn't your fight. It is now, she snapped. You made it my fight when you handed me those documents, when you dragged my father's name back into the fire. Adrian stared at her, conflicted. If you stay, it gets dangerous. Not emotionally, physically, you have no idea what he's capable of. Emma stepped closer. Try me. Before he could argue, the doorbell rang. Again, this time longer, more insistent. Adrian looked at her one last time, silently pleading. Emma's chin lifted. Let him in. The door creaked open with the reluctant groan of a house that knew trouble was about to walk in. Emma stood half-shadowed in the entryway behind Adrian as the man stepped through the threshold, like he owned the ground beneath his feet. He was taller than Adrian by an inch or two, with the same whole eyes steel gray, unblinking but none of the restraint. His jaw was sharper, his smirk colder, his tailored coat dusted with the chill of the mountain night. Little brother, he said, voice as smooth as poison. I see your taste in company has diversified. Emma's pulse quickened. She didn't flinch, but the weight of his gaze landed like a threat. He looked at her like she was a puzzle to be solved or a weapon to be stolen. Damien, Adrian said tightly, what do you want? Oh, you know, Damien said, walking slowly into the room, taking in the paintings, the silence, the sense of something unsaid in the air. Just thought I'd drop in and see how the Prince of Penance is doing. Cut the theatrics. But that's all I've got left, dear brother. Since you shut down my investment accounts and scrubbed me from the board, you even buried my shell companies overseas. Took me a week to even find the keys to that little digital mausoleum you built. Adrian stepped forward, blocking Emma from Damien's line of sight. She stepped around him. I'm not here for a show, she said. Say whatever it is you came to say. Damien's eyes flicked to her, amused. Bold. She always this mouthy, Adrian? Or just when she thinks she has something worth defending? Emma didn't blink. Try me. Damien smiled deep and less amused, more predatory. You're Emma Vasquez, daughter of Principal Michael Vasquez, tragic scapegoat of the Holt education collapse. Known for your tiny blog, your cinnamon toast nostalgia, and your surprisingly resilient moral compass. I've read your work. You stalked me. I researched you. Damien corrected. You're standing in the middle of a war you don't understand. Sweetheart, you think you're here because of fate, a favor. No, you're here because you're useful. Adrian's voice cut through like a blade. That's enough. Oh, is it? Damien turned to him. Then let's end it. You give me access to the Eden portfolio and the Bloomfield trusts, and I walk away. You keep your little redemption tour. You keep your guilt shrine. You keep her. Adrian stepped forward. You don't have leverage. Damien reached into his coat pocket and slowly withdrew a small drive. Emma watched it gleam in the dim light. What is that? She asked. Damien looked at her. Insurance. You see, your father wasn't just misguided. He was complicit. He had options. He had exit routes, but what he really wanted was in my pocket. Adrian paled. Don't. Oh, I will, Damien said softly, because I have no board to answer to anymore. Just a story the world will eat alive. He tossed the drive on the marble island. It slid and stopped just inches from Emma's hand. She stared at it. "What's on there?" she whispered. "Video footage," Damien said, "from the final district meeting, unreleased. Your father arguing against the delay, then being promised something off the record. A speaking circuit, a district leadership position, national exposure. He chose to launch the software because he thought it would get him out of the classroom and into the Capitol." Emma's stomach lurched. "No," she whispered. "He was tired, wasn't he?" Damien asked gently. "Worn down. Years of underfunded schools and being ignored. He just wanted out. I don't blame him. I just use him." Adrian looked like he might kill his brother. Emma looked like she might break. Damien stepped back. "So, here's the choice. You give me access to the trust funds, or I send that video to the press. Your redemption dies. And hers never even begins." Emma spoke then, her voice eerily calm. "What if I say no?" Damien raised a brow. "Then you watch your father's name burn for a second time." Silence settled, taut and full of teeth. Then Adrian stepped forward, shoulders squared, jaw tight. "You want access to Bloomfield." Damien smiled. "Now we're talking. You can have it," Adrian said. "But only after you give her the original copy of the video in front of me and sign a legal statement acknowledging its authenticity and the context in which it was obtained." Damien's face twitched. "You think you can negotiate with me?" Adrian stepped closer. "I'm not negotiating. I'm containing a threat." Emma stared between them, breath frozen. After a long pause, Damien's smile returned, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. "Fine," he said, "but you better hope she can live with the truth." He tossed a second encrypted drive onto the table and pulled out a pre-printed release form. Emma reached for it. Her fingers trembled as she read. It was real. All of it. Her father had been promised a future in exchange for compliance. He hadn't caused the failure, but he'd allowed it. In a moment of desperation, a moment of weakness. The truth wasn't a weapon. It was a wound. "Sign it," Adrian told Damien. Damien did, without hesitation. Then he looked at Emma one last time. "Be careful," he said. "Redemption's a tricky thing. Some people drown in it before they learn how to swim." Then he left. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stood there, hollow, shattered. Every image she'd held of her father was cracked, now still full of love, but no longer pure. Adrian came to her, gently. "You don't have to forgive him," he said, "but you can still honor the parts of him that were good." "I thought I knew what justice looked like," she whispered. "But maybe it's messier than that. Maybe it's not about blame. Maybe it's just about choosing who we become after the wreckage." He looked at her with something like awe. "What do you want to become?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes full of tears but also resolve. "Someone who builds something better." 6 months later, soft bell above the door chimed as customers flooded into Heirloom and Hearth. The intimate cafe Emma opened downtown with a small team of educators, chefs, and local artists. Every table had a story. Every dish was named after someone lost and remembered. And behind the counter, every morning, Emma baked cinnamon toast with a pinch of nutmeg and a sprinkle of forgiveness. Adrian sat near the window, laptop closed, coffee in hand, watching her with the quiet pride of a man who had learned that love cannot be earned with apologies but with action. He never tried to own her story. He just chose to walk beside her in it, and that was enough. Outside, the world remained chaotic, unfair, full of people like Damien. But inside that cafe, truth had a home, and so did she.